Welcome to Psyche Talks.
Great to be diving in again.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're really getting into the science of habit. We'll be looking at how, people and even big companies manage to change those really ingrained patterns.
And we've got some really compelling insights lined up. The goal is basically to unpack how habits actually work,
Hmm.
why they're just so powerful.
And how knowing all that can give you, well, the sources call it a flashlight and a crowbar. Tools, basically, to reshape things in your own life, maybe even in your workplace.
Exactly. We're talking brain science, some really surprising case studies, practical ways to break old habits, build new ones.
Right. We want to give you a clear path through this, without getting lost in overly technical stuff. A shortcut to understanding this really complex part of being human.
And what's really striking is just how fundamental habits are. I mean, they're running the show behind the scenes so much of the time, right?
Yep.
Often completely unconsciously.
Totally. We'll see examples today of incredible personal turnarounds, how successful teams operate, even how, whole social movements get going.
It all ties back to these underlying patterns.
Okay. Let's kick off with a story that really paints a picture of just how much change is possible. Lisa. She was 34, facing some pretty big hurdles.
Yeah, the description is quite stark. Smoking, drinking, obesity, significant debt. A tough situation.
Right. But then fast forward a bit, and it's like a different person. She'd quit smoking for almost 4 years, lost 60 pounds,
Ran a marathon.
ran a marathon, yeah. Went back for a master's degree, bought her own place. It's almost unbelievable, the transformation.
It really does sound dramatic.
Yeah.
But this wasn't just, a one-off anecdote. Lisa was actually part of some serious research.
Oh, right. Funded by the NIH.
Exactly. A whole team, neurologists, psychologists, geneticists, sociologists, studying people like Lisa who'd completely remade their lives. They were thorough. Well, they tracked vital signs, used video cameras to see daily routines, did DNA sequencing, even put people in scanners to see what their brains did when faced with temptation.
Wow. So they were really trying to get under the hood, neurologically speaking.
Precisely. What's happening in the brain when habits form, and more importantly, how does change actually happen on that level?
And that digging led to this really useful idea, the habit loop.
The core model.
Yeah.
Cue, routine, reward. 3 parts.
And it's not just theory. There's that example of the military major. He wasn't maybe the most obvious candidate for success, but he used this loop idea effectively.
Yeah, he got the loop right for his unit, and it made a huge difference. It shows it's about understanding the mechanics, not just innate talent or background.
And our understanding of the brain science behind this has jumped forward recently, hasn't it?
Oh, massively. In the last decade especially, we now know these loops, the trigger, the action, the payoff. The brain learns to expect they aren't set in stone.
So you can actually take them apart.
You can analyze them, yeah. Figure out the pieces and then consciously rebuild them to fit your goals.
Yeah.
Want to eat better, exercise more, be more productive. Understanding the loop is the key.
It's not magic though, right? It takes effort.
Definitely not always easy or instant, but it is possible, and knowing how it works makes that possibility feel much more real.
Okay, now the story of Eugene, or EP, this one. This really threw me. It shows how deep habits go, even when conscious memory is, well, gone.
Eugene's case is foundational, really.
Yeah.
Severe memory loss from an illness, couldn't remember what happened minutes ago, couldn't form new explicit memories.
But the habits.
The habits were still there, old ones, and incredibly, he could even form new ones without any conscious recollection of learning them.
Like finding the bathroom in his new house.
Exactly. Or taking the same route for walks every day, or eating breakfast multiple times if the cues were there again.
So how did they figure out he was forming new habits without memory?
Professor Squire did some clever experiments. Eugene wouldn't remember doing the tasks before, but his performance would improve over time, guided by repetition and cues. Like, on his walks, specific trees or mailboxes acted as unconscious signposts.
And the breakfast thing, just seeing the morning light or hearing the radio again.
Yeah, familiar cues just triggered the routine automatically. It's fascinating. Even emotional habits, like getting angry, could persist even if he forgot why he was angry moments later.
But it was also super fragile, right? Change the cues.
And he was lost, completely disoriented. It showed just how much those automatic behaviors depended on those exact, consistent triggers in his environment.
Which led to this revolutionary idea.
Yeah, that habits can function largely separate from conscious memory and reason. That was a huge shift in thinking.
So we've got the cue, the routine, the reward. But there's another piece, right? something maybe early guys like Claude Hopkins only touched on.
Craving. That's the crucial third element. Hopkins saw the cue and reward link, but didn't fully grasp the importance of the brain anticipating and desiring that reward.
So it's not just getting the reward, it's wanting it beforehand.
Exactly. Think about that exercise study from New Mexico State. People who stuck with exercise weren't just going through the motions. They started to crave the feeling afterwards.
The endorphins, the sense of accomplishment.
Without that craving developing, sparked by the cue, the habit just doesn't take root nearly as strongly. The cue has to ignite that anticipation.
That little story about the neuroscientist and the chicken nuggets kind of nails it, doesn't it? The unconscious pull.
It really does. Knowing it's not good for you doesn't always override that deep-seated craving loop once it's established.
And this crazing idea was key for Febreze, wasn't it? P&G couldn't figure out how to sell it initially.
Right. They thought the selling point was eliminating bad odors. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, logical.
But it wasn't working. Turns out people didn't really crave the absence of bad smells. What they craved was that feeling, that scent of cleanliness at the end of their cleaning routine.
Ah, so Febreze became the reward signal, the finishing touch.
Exactly. They shifted the marketing, use it last, get that nice smell, feel like you've accomplished something. That tapped into an existing desire, and boom, sales took off.
Amazing what understanding the real reward can do. Speaking of practical application, let's talk Tony Dungy and the Buccaneers. They were not good.
They were famously bad, yeah. And Dungy's approach was interesting. He didn't come in with some super complicated new playbook.
No, he focused on simplicity.
Extreme simplicity and repetition. He picked a few core defensive moves and drilled them relentlessly. The idea was to make reactions automatic.
So players would see a specific formation, a cue, or a key as he called it,
and react instantly with the practice routine without having to think. He basically reprogrammed their responses to existing visual cues on the field.
and it worked.
Slowly but surely. They got better, more consistent. Those ingrained habits under pressure made the difference, led them all the way.
It sounds a bit like the principle behind Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. It's often called this huge machine for changing the habit loops around drinking.
And its success is kind of remarkable, especially since it didn't start with, scientists designing it. It evolved organically.
But it taps into that golden rule of habit change you mentioned.
Absolutely. That's a core reason it works for so many. The golden rule is keep the cue, keep the reward, but insert a new routine.
Okay, so how does AA do that?
Well, think about the steps. Doing a personal inventory, admitting wrongs that helps people identify the cues that trigger their drinking, what situations, what feelings.
Oh, and the reward they're seeking. It's not always just the buzz, right?
Often it's something deeper. Escape, relaxation, numbing anxiety, social connection. AA helps pinpoint that underlying reward the person is craving.
And then it offers new routines.
Exactly. Going to meetings, calling a sponsor, working the steps. These become the new routines inserted between the old cue and the desired reward, offering healthier ways to cope or connect. You can apply the same logic to, say, quitting smoking. Identify why you smoke. Is it stress relief? Boredom? The social aspect? Then find a new routine that gives a similar reward.
And belief seems critical here, too. Dungy built belief in his team.
Nobody is going to outwork us. He drilled that belief in.
And in AA, seeing others succeed seems to foster that belief.
Hugely important. That sense of community, seeing people just like you who have found a way through, it creates this powerful sense of hope. If they can do it, maybe I can too.
It makes change feel possible.
Right. And it's often the small things within that community, like in John's story, just contributing in a small way, that start to build that belief in a different future for yourself.
Okay, so building on that, let's talk about keystone habits, these small changes that somehow ripple outwards.
Yeah, this is a fascinating concept. A keystone habit is one change that seems to spark a whole cascade of other positive changes, often unintentionally.
Like Paul O'Neill at Alcoa focusing obsessively on worker safety.
Exactly. That seemed like just one narrow goal, 0 injuries. But to achieve it, they had to change communication patterns, reporting systems, how managers and workers interacted.
And that created a culture shift.
Totally. It fostered habits of communication and problem solving that improved efficiency, quality, cost things way beyond just safety. That focus on safety opened the door for other good ideas, like that suggestion about the painting process.
And we see this in personal lives too, right? Like exercise.
Exercise is a classic keystone habit for many. People start exercising and then often find themselves eating better, sleeping better, being more productive, almost automatically.
Or family dinners.
Research suggests regular family dinners correlate with kids having better grades, more emotional stability. It's a routine that fosters communication and connection, even making your bed. Sounds trivial, but studies link it to better productivity, sticking to budgets. It seems to reinforce a sense of order and discipline.
So these keystone habits create small wins.
That's the idea. They provide early successes that build momentum and, crucially, reinforce that belief, I can change things. It makes bigger changes feel less daunting.
The Michael Phelps story is another great example of routines and belief. It wasn't just about swimming fast.
Not at all. His coach, Bob Bowman, was meticulous about building routines way beyond the pool. Diet, stretching, warm-ups, all precisely timed.
But also the mental stuff, the videotape.
Ah, yes, the mental visualization. Phelps would mentally rehearse a perfect race over and over, every single detail, from the dive to the finish, feeling the water, seeing himself win.
So it was like programming his brain for success.
Essentially, yes. Creating deeply ingrained mental habits that fostered this unshakable sense of practiced victory. Winning felt like the natural conclusion of the routine.
So even when things went wrong, like his goggles filling with water,
His body and mind just fell back on those thousands of hours of practiced routine, physical and mental. He could execute the race almost blind because the habit was so strong. It underlines how those small, consistent wins in practice build resilience.
it seems crises can also shake things up, especially in organizations, making habits more changeable.
Yes, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a crisis. The Rhode Island hospital example is stark. A series of really serious medical errors created this undeniable sense of urgency.
And that allowed changes that were maybe resisted before.
Exactly. Reforms around checklists, communication protocols, things that make sense but can be hard to implement in a settled system, suddenly became possible because the crisis made the old habits feel untenable. It highlighted how crucial leadership is in those moments, to seize the chance to build better habits.
Shifting gears a bit, Target and their predicting pregnancy thing. That's kind of wild.
It is a bit startling, yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew Pohl's work there, based on Alan Andreessen's research about life stage events.
The idea being that big life changes make our habits shift, like having a baby.
Precisely.
Yeah.
People's buying patterns changed dramatically. Target figured out they could identify customers likely to be pregnant based on subtle shifts in what they bought: unscented lotion, specific supplements.
And then they started sending coupons.
Yeah, but cleverly. They didn't just send ads for cribs and diapers, because that might feel intrusive, creepy even.
Right.
They mixed the baby stuff in with random other offers, lawnmowers, wine glasses, so it looked less like surveillance. It's about dressing something new in old, familiar habits to make it easier to accept.
That principle of using existing patterns feels relevant to social movements, too, like Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. It wasn't just one person, was it?
No, movements rely on social habits. There are the habits of friendship, the strong ties. Rosa Parks was well respected. Her friends were the first to mobilize.
But it needed more than just friends, right?
Absolutely. That's where the habits of community come in the weaker ties. People who didn't know Parks personally joined because of social connection and, frankly, peer pressure within the Black community. It spread through existing social networks.
And leadership was key to sustaining it. Nixon, Martin Luther King Jr.
Critical. They helped organize, but importantly, King provided new habits, the philosophy and practice of nonviolent resistance. This gave people a new routine, a shared identity, a way to act collectively and sustain the boycott despite huge challenges.
Creating a new pattern of behavior for the whole community.
Exactly. And that sustained collective action, built on strong ties, weak ties, and these new shared habits, eventually led to success and fueled the wider civil rights movement.
The script then touches on something quite different: sleepwalking and the neurology behind it.
Yeah, it's a startling example of habits operating completely divorced from conscious control. The case of the man who killed his wife while sleepwalking is tragic, but neurologically.
The conscious brain is offline.
Essentially, the parts monitoring behavior are asleep, but other parts, capable of complex actions like driving or, tragically, violence, can be awake, guided purely by deeply ingrained motor habits.
Which raises huge questions about responsibility.
It does, legally and ethically. It shows some habits can be so powerful they overwhelm conscious choice in extreme circumstances.
But that's different from our everyday habits, the ones we are aware of.
Absolutely. That sleepwalking case is an outlier. For most of our habits, we have awareness. And understanding how they work, the loop, the craving, the golden rule, gives us the power and maybe the responsibility to change them.
It moves away from that idea of just being carried along by habit, like William James described life.
Right. James talked about life being massive habits, bearing us irresistibly toward our destiny. And he struggled with this himself. But understanding the mechanics means we're not just passengers. We can actually grab the wheel.
And the personal stories near the end really drive that home. Tom Payton losing weight.
By finally nailing down the cues and rewards for his eating, what was he really seeking when he reached for snacks?
Or Eric Earle quitting smoking and realizing it was a keystone habit for other unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah. He replaced smoking with meditation, addressed the underlying need, and found other positive changes followed. It shows people really applying these ideas.
So it boils down to that practical framework, a way to actually do this.
hmm 4 steps seem to capture it. 1, identify the routine you want to change. 2, experiment with different rewards. What are you actually craving? 3, isolate the cue. What exactly triggers the routine?
And 4,
Have a plan. Decide beforehand what new routine you'll do when the cue hits to get a similar reward.
like the afternoon cookie example. Figure out if you're hungry, bored, need energy, or want social time, and then plan a different routine for when 3:30 p.m. rolls around.
Exactly. It gives you a concrete process to work through rather than just relying on willpower alone.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has shed some light on this whole world of habits, maybe sparked a few aha moments for you listening.
Yeah, just understanding how these powerful loops operate under the surface can be, well, it can be the first real step toward making changes you want to make.
Maybe take a moment to think about your own routines. What are the cues? What rewards are really driving them? You could even try experimenting with a small shift to see what happens.
The science is always evolving too. We're
Yeah.
constantly learning more about our behavior and our potential to reshape it.
So we definitely encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, see how they might fit with your own goals, your own challenges.
Absolutely. It's powerful stuff.
Thank you for your support and for listening.